Welcome, dear audience, to today's event brought to you by Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture. My name is Mohamed Ghawalma, Executive Director of our organization. We're privileged to be screening the original and provocative TAHRIR Liberation Square, and are delighted to host its director, Stefano Savona, in conversation with Joseph Fahim, curator of the film series 10 Years Since Tahrir, of which Tahrir Liberation Square is a part. It is our concluding documentary, in fact. I welcome you, Stefano, from Paris, and you, Joseph, from Cairo. I would like to thank our funders and donors, without whose support we would not be positioned to bring you such arts programming. These include foundations, the Ford Foundation, the National Network of Arab American Communities, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, PNC Arts Alive, the Samuel F. Fells Fund, and the William Penn Foundation, as well as federal, state, and local government entities, the Philadelphia Council on the Arts, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, and the US Small Business Administration. I would be remiss not to thank all of the individual donors whose support has long sustained Al-Bustan with care and commitment, including audience members graciously joining us today. We welcome your donations, and we especially welcome your engagement in conversation with Director Savona by way of questions or comments. We certainly encourage you to join in. I hand it off to our trusted curator, Joseph Fahim.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It's this program has been quite a challenge in not just securing the films and getting all the films that we want to see you that would also like fit the story that we want to convey about what happened in those 11 days and the legacy of Tahrir, those 18 days. But also with all kinds of hiccups regarding the willingness of filmmakers to talk openly about that period and that time, which seems that, for some reason nobody wants to talk about. And that, and as we mentioned, always it seems to have been transformed into this forgotten or deliberately forgotten history. Stefano, I saw your film, as we were just saying, ages ago when it premiered in 2012 at the Dubai Film Festival. And back in the day when the revolution was actually a hot topic, that was the toast of the festival circuit, the one topic that everybody wanted to get on. And it struck me because I think at that point there have been several films made about the revolution from non-Egyptian filmmakers and Egyptian filmmakers alike, each try not only to chronicle what happened in those 18 days, but try to understand. Well, I think what struck me about your film is almost like the impression. It offers almost an impressionistic view of Tahrir, in the sense that it doesn't try to offer any political analysis or try to get into the reason why this thing happened. You automatically throw us directly in the middle of the action, and a lot of things happen in the movie that we're going to talk about in a bit. But I think what struck me most, as I mentioned, is how physical it is. For me, it felt that it's the most physical of all the documentaries and films made about the revolution. Definitely captures that sense of, like endless commotion, of idealism, at the same time all the danger that is coming from different ways that you don't know where of its source. And yeah, incredible in that sense. It reminds us of, I think it's one of those movies that really physically reminds you of what it felt to be physically in Tahrir Square. And my first and most obvious question is, what brought the Italian man to Tahrir to begin with?
Thank you all. I mean, it's really a privilege to be here and to speak with you, and especially that your audience has been able to watch this movie, which is a 10-year-old movie that I'm still so attached with, because it was a great moment, completely unexpected. You asked me how I ended up in Tahrir. I've spent since my 20s, since I was a teenager, even before, I want to be an Egyptologist. So I studied Egyptology. I went to Egypt as an Egyptologist. It was my childhood dream to do that, to dig up mummies and things like that. And then once that the dream was somehow fulfilled, but still very young, I felt that it was really as stupid as many childhood dreams are. I mean, if you stick to what you were dreaming of when you were 5, when you are 25, something is wrong. And for me, my switch was, I want to tell stories of what's going on here these days, so about the people I meet. And it was in Egypt that at first I decided to switch to first to photography and then to documentary filmmaking. And still a kind of naive way, I tried. I mean, I succeeded in beginning a new career. And then for some reasons, I went back almost every year to Egypt after quitting Egyptology, because it was the place where everything for me had begun. But I didn't find the story that I really wanted to tell. I mean, I met people, I made pictures, and somehow I felt that it was kind of abstract place for me, some kind of my own esoticism, the place where I was feeling just the attraction of something that was different from what I knew. I knew more and I knew better and better, but still was sounding like Orientalism, whatever I was doing there. And then at the same time, I was feeling like I had made a movie in Kurdistan with Kurdish rebels, and there I felt that I was getting more and more fond with politics, with filming politics, political situations, and people getting together to change things, this kind of thing. And I sincerely didn't expect that I would film exactly that. That was kind of my dream in Egypt. As much as I felt that could never happen in Italy or in Sicily, or I felt it could never happen in Egypt, because I felt it was a place. In this, I felt I knew that place, I knew those people, and I felt that wasn't something that would happen there. And then it did. From like overnight, it did, and I was working at something completely different, and I didn't have any possibility to get there, but I couldn't avoid. I mean, I was in front of Al Jazeera as the rest of the world, and I said, okay, that's happening there, and I'm not there. Why? So I took maybe it was the last plane from Paris to Cairo with a very small camera, because I felt it was like too suspicious to get there with a big range camera or whatever. So I had this small.
It was 6 days after the revolution began, right?
Yeah, I don't remember if it was 5, 6. I mean, it was very, very early, but still, it had already begun, and because I had watched it happening from my screen, and while trying to editing another movie, I just switched to Al Jazeera, and then I switched to a place where I could buy a ticket, and then I was there, and my girlfriend was saying, "Okay, I know you are going. Don't tell me anything. Let's just go." And because we were not because she was my girlfriend, but we were supposed to finish that movie for a date, and we never did. But anyway, this is another story. So I land there, and every time you get to a place to make a movie, you have you fantasize, and you have.
By the way, like nobody bothered you at the airport or anything. You just came smoothly.
Yeah.
Nobody asked you any questions.
I was
at
alone
airport,
and
security.
with a small camera. I just got there, and there was. I mean, it wasn't a TV. I was just myself and a small camera with a very small microphone, which is always what shows you are pro or not. So I didn't have a pro microphone. It took like 6 months to edit the sound of the movie because I had no proper mic. But anyway, I went straight to the place, and with no specific idea of what I would film, or I felt I will do many interviews with people, asking them where they come from, what's their life in their town, or what's their job. And just because I needed, from what I saw in Al Jazeera, I didn't understand who they were. I mean, I just saw them like small ants from a distance. Being there, I felt that what I could film was this kind of a background, and once there, everything was happening so fast, so clearly, so cinematically in front of my camera, that I had just to switch it on and to pray that everything was like as in focus as possible and the sound was bearable and so on. And that was it actually.
You didn't have any aid. Nobody was with you. You filmed the whole thing entirely by yourself.
Just to stick
wow.
The first interesting. I mean, I fall in love with a group of guys, and I stick with them because I knew that if I, for some reason, I would lose them, I wouldn't find them again. And the moment I tried to quit the square to go to a hotel just to recharge my batteries, it was so dangerous as I say, okay, I stay here, I'll try to recharge the batteries from the square itself, because if I sleep here, if I stay here, I'm safe. It was clear.
So guys, a second. All throughout like the next 12 days, you did not leave Tahrir at all?
Just once.
You were just once. Wow.
And I risked all in that single time. I was saved by some taxi driver who was like blocked by the police, and he knew we were going to Tahrir, and I hadn't told him, okay, if they stop us, you say something else. And he knew he would say them anything but that we were going to Tahrir. So he invented a story, and they said, okay, and it brought me to Tahrir. It was simply as absurd as that. And if they had stopped me, I wouldn't have done the rest of the movie. It was like 4 or 5 days after the beginning of it all. And from there on, I had my friends, the ones I was filming, sometimes they were quitting the square, so they brought home my batteries, they charged them, they brought them back, and that was it. I mean, it was so adventurous and simple and completely in sync with what was happening there, because we were all we all had superpowers those days somehow. I mean, and the same, we are like this. We are who we are. I mean, me and the others. Just like 1 week later, we were back to normal, as stupid, as pointless, as split as usual. I remember speaking with people I had met there. Like, I don't remember if it was 1 year and a half later when everything collapsed. And they were saying the most, online.
It took a little longer than a year.
2 years before, before the coming to power of the military. And I remember getting mad with them because they were saying things that were absolutely inconceivable there in the square. And it looked like nothing had happened somehow. That's what I feel, that, being there together and in that kind of state of excitation made us all more clear-sighted than we would ever be back at home in front of a screen. I remember they said things about about what was going on later that looked exactly what the propaganda was saying about the people in the square those first days of the revolution.
Wow. Like the narrative changed quickly. We're gonna get to what happened after Tahrir, but I have two more questions for you. One, why did you decide to keep the documentary like that without having a specific narrative, or without following characters, or without adopting more of a tradition and linear? Not linear. But yeah, more of a traditional or classical structure. That's one thing. And then second, what struck you? What made you the more optimistic the most of everything you were seeing in Tahrir, and what made you worried the most while you were experiencing all of this?
Actually, I had read a lot about what happened in Italy at the end of the Second World War, or those about revolutions. It was kind of subject that I was very fond before getting to Tahrir. And for me, what I was after was filming the people who are just the moment they decide to pass to action, and the way they organize with each other in that exact moment. I wasn't so much interested in violence or fighting, and I was interested in normal people like 20 years old who from one day to the other discover they have the capacity of leading other peoples to action, on finding the way to address other people in that way, which is so specific. I mean, to get to terms with their own power, with their own capacity for leading, for organizing, and because that's not now, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago. That's not what you expect from a 20 years old that is just like more or less a brat, or you just think that they are not good with that. But the more I read about what happened in Italy in the 40s, in the mid 40s, or everywhere actually, they were that same kind of people that they were 18, 19, even 17, and they just discovered that they had something more in themselves because the situation asked for some specific quality of power, and they found them in themselves. And being able to film that, to witness that, to capture that on camera was my absolute dream. I mean, the dream that I did many times. I dreamt in the night before Tahrir of filming this kind of, and I didn't know what it looked like, and I didn't even know that what I would film in Tahrir would look like that. And once there, I said that. I mean, I recognized it from something I had been dreaming about, and I felt, okay, all I have to do, which is a lot actually, is to be able to take care of these bodies in the space, to understand how they look at each other, they organize in the space, one in front of the other, because it's not about, I mean, it's all about the position of my camera. If I can grasp that, if I can render that in my movie or not. Because if I can ask questions and they can answer, I can try to go from a distance and show the wall of it. But if you get too near, you lose everything. If you get too far, the crowd is just a crowd. But if you find the right way to see how the crowd is people who are looking at each other, who are like discovering each other, that's, I mean, that's a dream for somebody who is doing documentaries, because it's, I mean, the drama is always there. If it's just because two people have just met each other, or it's because somebody is attacking you, for any reason, it's always happening something, because even the simplest thing there was like charged with drama. So that's why for me it was somehow easy to do it, and I spent like the 10 years after Tahrir to understand what I had done and how I had done it, because I'd done it completely out of instinct, and then I also spent those years like crying about when trying to find another situation that I could make cinema with the same force, and I didn't find it, of course, because I mean, it's one of those moments when history is like gets a rush and makes time counts so much, and it's never the case. I mean, I spent 10 years with my other documentary. I had begun it before Tahrir, and I finished it like 2 years ago, because the time of history is another one. But whenever this acceleration happens, it's a miracle. I mean, doesn't last long, as we all know, but it's something, and doesn't get old somehow, because the revolution is still in its 20s, so in her 20s, I imagine it female character. And I mean, I wouldn't like to know where those guys are now. I mean,
You haven't been in touch with them. You never kept in touch with them.
But until like 2-3 years, and then I felt no. I mean, they are no longer. I mean, I'm no longer the same. They aren't either. And sometimes I even recently I got in touch with them, but I don't recognize them. I don't want to recognize them because it's somehow. I mean, it's easy to be sad because you get because you are 20 and then you are 30 and more fat or more and less adventurous, but it's unfair somehow. I mean, it's something that you should that you should do in that age. That some moment it helps the whole society, and that was the most moving thing there in the square was the way older people were speaking about the youngsters. They were like. They were giving them their powers back finally in a patriarchal society, Egyptian, and it would have been the same in Italy. And finally, it was like a switch of power balance that is so necessary in any society in any moments of history. And you asked me for the war thing. I mean, when you are in a square like this, there is the crowd, and the crowd is always. It has in itself the
body, the crowd,
the hope of a parliament, and the menace of a mob. And so there was the moment where when that square was 1 inch away from being a mob, and they felt that everything could get terrible in like no time, and some moments of extreme hope where you could feel like parliament that was spreading from those guys. The problem with the crowd is this, that it's balance. It's always something that is unbalanced, that it can go anywhere.
We want to open up as we continue talking, we want to open up the room for discussions. So like questions, I mean, so any questions or comments, please send them our way. I mean, like, I mean, we were talking like earlier, you were talking earlier about, like the guys and how they change and everything and how we can face up there. And I think, and how, like older people were more receptive perhaps. But I think like older people, when they went back, I mean, they did not have a great degree of difficulty to adjust to the way the things once were when things did not work out. So like in that sense, it was not difficult for them to readjust back to when, like the revolution did not succeed, where I think people of my generation and a little bit younger, like, I mean, this was the most important event of our history, like we thought, okay, this was it. And I think it wasn't just like the dream of like freedom and democracy and stuff like that. There's all of like the aspiration that comes up with it, like the secular society, like the sexual freedoms, the breaking up of class barriers. There's all of these things, and we were dreaming up here is, like, because I mean, Tahrir people like would say that it was like they would tell us that we idealized it much more than it is, but I mean, it was in a way, or at least some aspects of it, and at least some moments, it was pretty idealistic place where there is people at the front asking you where you're going, and people like greeting you while you're coming in, and no sexual harassment. Everybody, being like the Muslim Brotherhood with the atheists sitting side by side, even though everybody, of course, was alarmed about the Muslim Brotherhood, which for a good reason. Also, that everything that happened afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I've seen like the best of Egypt in those 18 days, and vividly remember afterwards, one of my favorite anecdotes is when I went to the Russian embassy. It was my first trip after the revolution into Russia, and I was, applying for the visa, and I was asking the guys, so how are things done? And they were telling me, you have two ways: either you would like bribe the guy, or you just like wait your turn, or something along those lines. And then they were telling me, but honestly, like after the revolution, these were just like normal, regular guys. They were like, but after the revolution, we vowed not to do like the whole bribing anymore. We just want to play things right. And I think for like maybe up until the parliamentary elections, when the Muslim Brotherhood took the parliament and things started getting murky, there was that sense of, like, I think it's like the first time we were proud to be Egyptians. We had infinite hope. But yeah, I think like things went horribly wrong. I mean, why things went wrong is I think the untold story of the revolution that nobody has told so far. And I mean, it wasn't just one factor. It wasn't just the Muslim Brotherhood. It wasn't just the military. It was also us, the intellectual left, who got stuck in Tahrir Square and did not play politics, and were consumed by our pride and our egos, and we let the revolution slip out of our hands. So I mean, it's very composite, but I think, yeah, I mean, what you capture in the film is very true in the sense that this was a place full of endless possibilities. It showed the best of what this country could be. It showed a great deal. I would still like remember on Sunday a mass being held, and Muslims who've never been to a mass in their life reciting the Lord's Prayer because they felt it was beautiful. And I thought like this was one of my favorite moments of the entire time being Tahrir. So yeah. And I think like, again, the last thing I'm going to say about this is why I think you may have also found it difficult with like the youngsters and the people that you were in touch with not to be in touch with anymore. I think we're traumatized by what happened. I think we came very close and slipped by. And I know a lot of people with like friends and colleagues who are like, we wish this thing never happened because it gave us too much hope. And when it didn't happen, it just crushed us. So, yeah, I mean, we have a question. Tell us about the characters you revisited in the documentary.
Yeah. It's, as I told, I just got in touch with, I mean, I just stayed in touch with some of them, and until recently, and some just disappeared in everyday life, as most of the people from Tahrir. Noah, who was like the girl, was actually quite, I mean, not politically from the Muslim Brotherhood, but she was somehow in between, and she moved to the US later because she couldn't stay in Egypt any longer, and she's studying. I don't remember which she was studying now. I think she's finished. She was studying in some political science in some American university, and she was so unique somehow. When you cast a documentary, I mean, when you have time to imagine who is going to be the protagonist of my movie, you try to choose well, because you feel, and I mean, it's very stupid from whenever you think that you have to be objective or like to show different sides. So you just say, okay, how can I choose my protagonists? One maybe is a woman, is a man, one is from the left, from the right, and one is from the countryside and the young, somebody from another age. And then it's no longer a movie, because everybody is no longer himself, but it's supposed to be like the expression of something bigger than himself, and it doesn't work like that. And I was lucky somehow to be alone with no time and no possibility of choosing anybody else than those that first I found interesting, or simply I fall in love with them. And that's why I don't pretend that that kind of choice was objective, or like that all those guys were like that. because it was just 3 or 4 of them, and that those guys I happened to follow, and it was incredible for me. I mean, all the ways they opened, because when I end up on the big stage with the Wael Gonim was because I didn't even know who he was. That I was following Noah and said, "There's Wael Gonim, let's go." And he went, and I followed there, and we found ourselves just beside him at the moment he was speaking with the crowd. So it's completely unexpected, and I discovered later how important that moment was, because I was lucky. Maybe I was simply lucky of following the right person at the right time. But many more stories of this kind, because everything happened just as easily as that, and everything made sense somehow.
I have another question. When you heard that people want the fall of the regime and others chanting that people want the fall of the president, did you think they were asking for the same thing?
It's a good question. I think, of course, I mean, they were asking for the, as you said, they were asking for revolution in all the sense of the word. It was social revolution. It could have been political revolution, and they were fed up with what they had been living, what we were living with until that moment, and they felt they had the power to overthrow everything, to change everything. So the regime, in the sense, in all the senses, I mean, within the family, or in the political regime, or even the regime of what to eat, I mean, everything. They were there to change everything, and of course they couldn't change everything. And so, in the moment he went away, they overthrew the Mubarak. They felt that they had won, and they felt that they had lost everything. I mean, I mean, in the end, and I think the movie somehow tells that there was this desperation, because they had won the battle, but they had lost the square. And when everybody went home, they knew they would be back to normal somehow. They knew that the regime wasn't gone. They knew that the regime of our bad habits would get back soon, and whatever was happening there in the square, which was mostly that you could speak with everybody, even if you knew that in a way politically they were the enemies, or like ideologically. I mean, there was a kind of free stage for that kind of confrontation, and that was no longer the case once you get back home, and you, I mean, we know now, because now we are back home, like now everybody's home, and we can, I mean, I've never missed Tahrir as much as since the pandemics has brought me, has closed me in front of a screen within my home, because it's exactly the opposite. The square is the place where everything can happen, and here is the place. I mean, we do our best. We are here like discussing and doing it as if we can break this wall, but still this is a wall. I mean, we are within walls, and there were no walls. It's enormous. Tahrir is, I mean, I think that Tahrir or Tiananmen, their best quality is just sheer space, because it's not so easy to be in the same place with millions of people, and to be in the same place with millions of people, you need a very large square. So, I mean, if there is some would-be dictator that is watching this, remove very big spaces from your towns if you don't want to be overthrown.
We need to wrap up soon, so yeah, any questions or comments, this is your last chance to send them. My personal final question to you, which is, yeah, things went horribly wrong in the preceding 10 years, and of course, like being Italian, there is that also like extra case of Giulio Regini and what happened to him, which it must have, you know, meant something even more prominent to you in relation to Tahrir.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, and then, you know, like Italy's deal like with Egypt, with the gas and all of that, and I mean the whole charade. So yeah, how do you see Tahrir? How do you see 2011, 10 years from now, what it all means to you? And where do you see it going next?
I don't know. I mean, for me personally, I felt, I mean, I had felt that in Egypt everything was possible, literally. When the movie I had shot before Tahrir was in the Gaza Strip during the first, during the attack of 2009. And I remember the moment I was like, as everybody else who cares for this part of the world, I was in despair and rage at home, and the feeling that nobody was telling that story from inside. And then I thought, okay, but Gaza has some part of its border with Egypt. So if I go to Egypt, I can get in Gaza. I was sure that I would, and actually I did, because in Egypt I could enter Gaza during the war because everything was somehow possible. I mean, I knew people. I knew that you could speak with people. You could understand. It's a bit like in southern Italy, where I'm from, where you can feel that with just your personal feeling, you can get places. You can. I mean, I never felt in danger. Never, not a single moment. Not even in Tahrir. Not even when I was getting in the tunnels to get into Gaza. And then after the coming to power of the current regime in Egypt, from one day to the other, I felt I don't want to get there. I wouldn't feel safe. It's something that never happened to me, but the sensation that I would feel in danger, it was so overwhelming. I didn't go to Egypt anymore. It's very strange because usually even in the worst moments, I was never scared. And then happened what happened to Giulio Regeni, and I felt that's exactly what I felt that could never happen before in Egypt, and now it's happening. And I didn't say, I mean, I was right, it was awful, but I felt that he was feeling like I was, somehow that you can, that people would help you anyway, that even if the regime is not good, you can still find shelter in among people. And I hope it will change. I mean, my personal feeling, because I miss Egypt a lot, and I would get there no matter what now, because I mean the nostalgia is more than the fear. But still, I would never, not for a single moment, imagine that my experience with Tahrir would end up in this bad feeling toward this country, which is the most important place for me, except like where I'm from, Palermo, Sicily, Italy, and where I live, which is France. But and now actually I couldn't. I mean, all along I felt I knew something about Egypt, but since I haven't been there for 10 years, I don't know what's going on there.
It's very different.
I mean,
it's all bridges now.
What?
It's all bridges. It's all bridges now. They did nothing but build bridges. This is how the country, how the city is. Nothing but bridges.
Pharaohs too.
Yeah. Okay, so we want to like end actually like on a nice question. So and we got it, and our very final question. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, tell us please about the poem about liberty and how you decided to.
Al-Sayed Abbas, who was a wonderful guy that I met there, and the moment he was like shooting his head and felt like defeated general. At the moment I met him, and I never left him. I didn't even know that he was a poet. He told me, when he was speaking perfect English, and told me that he was studying English literature at the university. So it helped because he could translate for me and be in the movie and everything. And then there was a moment, like some days before the Mubarak's fall, where he took out of his pocket a piece of paper and began reading. And I was from a distance, because he wasn't reading to me, he was reading to a friend there. So I was just filming, and then I felt that it was a poem, but I almost missed the beginning of that poem, and then the moment I discovered it was a poem, I tried to get nearer to have the sound of that poem in a bit better quality. And then much later I translated it because I couldn't get the whole of it, and I felt it was wonderful. I mean, I did love it really, and so since I went back to Tahrir, I mean to Egypt in May, that was of course in February, and then I went back in May because I wanted to show the movie to its protagonists to be sure that everything works for them, and there I asked him, can you please read it properly for me? Like, so I re-recorded the whole of the poem, and I used it on the images of other things because I didn't have the sync with the original one. That was one of the very few moments in the movie where I depart from real-time sound and the image, just to comment with a different sound some other images. And yeah, that's a bit the history of that poem.
Stefano, thank you so much. Such a great conversation. It also brought back a lot of memories for me. So thank you for that, and thank you for allowing us to show the movie. And thanks again for Al-Bustan for hosting this for yet another lively discussion and for continuing the program.
Thank you, Mohammed.
You're welcome. In closing, I'd like to extend our own gratitude to both Joseph and Stefano for joining us. We'd like to thank our audience for coming on and for such an engaging conversation and notable engagement. We welcome your registration in the next installment in our Tahrir series. Next week, we've got The Unknown Sweet Potato Salesman. And it should be followed by, and is to be followed by, a Q&A with its star and producer, Khalid Abul Naga. We look forward to seeing you at our next engagement. Be well. Salam.